The handcuffs clicked shut around Maya Johnson's wrists, with a sound that would haunt her daughter's dreams for months to come. 8-year-old Zara stood frozen beside their picnic blanket, her small brown hands clutching a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich, watching as two police officers positioned themselves between her and her mother in the middle of Riverside Community Park. "Mama." Zara's voice cracked like a twig underfoot, barely audible above the distant laughter of children on the playground swings. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and what had been their perfect mother-daughter tradition was transforming into a nightmare that neither of them could have imagined when they'd packed their simple lunch that morning. Officer Bradley Martinez shifted uncomfortably, his radio crackling with dispatch chatter. He'd been on the force for 12 years, but something about this call felt wrong from the moment he'd received it. The woman before him, Dr. Maya Johnson, held herself with quiet dignity despite the restraints, her medical ID badge still clipped to her navy blue scrubs from her shift at Children's Hospital. Her daughter bore an unmistakable resemblance to her, sharing the same warm brown eyes, the same delicate nose, the same stubborn set to her jaw that Maya recognized from her own reflection. "Officer, there's clearly been a misunderstanding," Maya said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She'd spent the last 6 months working double shifts to save for Zara's birthday party next week, and now she was being treated like a criminal in front of her child. "This is my daughter. We come here every Wednesday after her school lets out. Mrs. Henderson at the front desk of the school can verify that I pick her up every single day." 30 feet away, behind a cluster of oak trees, Karen Whitmore stood with her arms crossed, her phone still in her hand from the 911 call she'd made 20 minutes earlier. She wore designer yoga pants and a matching top that cost more than Maya's monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail that hadn't moved despite the afternoon breeze. Karen had been watching them for the better part of an hour, convinced that something wasn't right about the scene before her. "I'm telling you, that child doesn't belong with that woman," Karen had insisted to the dispatcher, her voice sharp with certainty. "I've been watching them, and it's obvious she's not the mother. The girl is too light-skinned, her hair is different, and she keeps looking around like she's scared. I think we have a kidnapping situation here." The second officer, Patricia Webb, knelt down to Zara's eye level, her voice gentler than her partner's had been. She'd been a mother herself before joining the force, and every instinct told her that this little girl belonged exactly where she was. But protocol was protocol, and they had to investigate every report, no matter how misguided it might seem. "Sweetie, can you tell me your name?" Officer Webb asked, her tone soft and reassuring. Zara's eyes darted between the officer and her mother, confusion and fear warring across her young face. She'd been taught to trust police officers, to see them as helpers, but nothing about this situation felt safe or helpful. "Zara Marie Johnson," she whispered, her voice so quiet that Officer Webb had to lean closer to hear her. "That's my mama. We were having our Wednesday picnic. We always have Wednesday picnics after my piano lesson. Mama brings me here because I like to watch the ducks in the pond." Maya's heart clenched as she watched her daughter struggle to understand why her mother was in handcuffs, why strangers were asking her questions, why their peaceful afternoon had turned into something from a horror movie. She could see other park visitors beginning to notice the commotion, some stopping their activities to stare, others pulling out their phones to record what was happening. "Officers, please," Maya said, her professional composure beginning to crack. "I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. I have identification. I have photos of my daughter on my phone. I have her birth certificate in my purse. This is absolutely ridiculous. Who even called this in?" Officer Martinez gestured toward the trees where Karen still stood. no longer trying to hide her presence. A concerned citizen reported suspicious activity. She believed the child might be in danger. Maya followed his gaze and saw Karen for the first time. Recognition dawning in her eyes. She'd seen this woman before, at the grocery store, at the gas station, always watching, always frowning, always finding reasons to insert herself into situations that had nothing to do with her. Maya had learned to navigate around people like Karen throughout her life, had developed strategies to make herself smaller, quieter, less threatening to their fragile sensibilities. But today, with her daughter watching, with handcuffs cutting into her wrists, with the weight of generations of injustice pressing down on her shoulders, Maya found her voice growing stronger instead of weaker. "Let me guess," Maya said, her words sharp enough to cut glass. She saw a black woman with a child and assumed the worst. She didn't bother to observe that we've been here peacefully for over an hour, that my daughter is comfortable and happy, that we know each other's favorite foods and inside jokes. She just saw what she wanted to see and decided to play savior. Karen finally approached, her designer sneakers crunching on the autumn leaves that had begun to fall. Up close, her face was flushed with righteous indignation, her eyes bright with the kind of fervor that comes from believing oneself to be absolutely correct in the face of all evidence to the contrary. "I was protecting this child," Karen announced, her voice carrying across the park. "Anyone with eyes can see that she doesn't belong with that woman. Look at them. The coloring is all wrong. The hair texture is different. I've seen enough Amber Alerts to know what child trafficking looks like. And this is exactly what it looks like." Zara began to cry, finally understanding that this strange woman was the reason her mother was being treated like a criminal. The tears came in great, gasping sobs that seemed to echo across the suddenly quiet park. Maya's maternal instincts overrode everything else, and she took a step toward her daughter before Officer Martinez's firm hand on her arm stopped her. "You can't comfort her while you're under investigation," he said, though his voice carried less conviction than it had moments before. Watching Zara's distress, seeing the obvious bond between mother and daughter, he was beginning to question the wisdom of this entire situation. "Under investigation for what?" Maya's voice rose, her careful composure finally cracking. "For existing while black. For having the audacity to spend time with my own child in a public park. For not meeting this woman's narrow definition of what a mother should look like." Officer Webb stood up from her crouch beside Zara, her expression troubled. In her interview with the child, every answer had confirmed what her instincts had told her from the beginning. Zara knew intimate details about Maya's life, spoke about their home, their routines, their shared memories with the kind of casual familiarity that couldn't be faked or coached. "She knows her mother's work schedule," Officer Webb reported quietly to her partner. "She knows about their pet goldfish named Frederick, about how her mom sings off-key in the shower, about the scar on her mom's knee from when she fell off her bike as a kid. This isn't a kidnapping, Martinez. This is a family." But Karen wasn't finished. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through what appeared to be a series of photos she'd taken without permission during their picnic. "I have evidence," she declared triumphantly. "Look at these pictures. Look how uncomfortable the child appears. Look how she keeps glancing around nervously. These are classic signs of distress." Maya looked at the photos over the officer's shoulder and felt her blood pressure spike. The images were carefully cropped and timed to capture moments out of context. A photo of Zara looking toward the playground appeared sinister when you couldn't see that she was simply watching other children play. A picture of Maya checking her phone looked suspicious when you couldn't tell that she was responding to a text from her supervisor about scheduling next week's shifts. "This is harassment," Maya said firmly. You've been photographing my child without permission, constructing a false narrative based on your own prejudices. I want to file charges against this woman for stalking and making a false police report." By now, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Some were clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Others were openly recording the incident on their phones. Maya noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Mrs. Rodriguez from Zara's school, who'd brought her own grandchildren to the park. Their eyes met across the space, and Maya saw recognition and outrage reflected in the older woman's expression. "That's Zara's mother, Mrs. Rodriguez called out, her accented voice carrying clearly in the afternoon air. "I see her every day at school pickup. She volunteers for every field trip, every bake sale. She's one of the most devoted mothers in our entire school community." Another voice joined hers. "I know her too. She's Dr. Johnson from the Children's Hospital. She saved my nephew's life last year when he had pneumonia." More voices added to the chorus of support. People stepping forward to vouch for Maya's character, to testify to the bond they'd witnessed between mother and daughter. The tide of public opinion was shifting dramatically, and Karen found herself increasingly isolated in her accusations. Officer Martinez's radio crackled again, and he stepped away to take the call. When he returned, his expression was grim. Dispatch just ran the license plate and identification. Dr. Maya Johnson, registered nurse at Children's Hospital. No outstanding warrants, no criminal history. The child's birth certificate lists her as the mother, and school records confirm daily pickup by the same person. Karen's face flushed deeper, but she wasn't ready to back down. "Birth certificates can be forged," she insisted. "Anyone can claim to be anyone these days. I still think we need DNA testing to be absolutely certain. The safety of this child is more important than anyone's hurt feelings." The crowd's murmur grew angry at this suggestion. Someone shouted, "Leave them alone!" Another voice added, "This is ridiculous." Maya looked at her daughter, who had stopped crying but was now sitting quietly on their picnic blanket, staring at her untouched sandwich. The joy had gone out of her young face, replaced by a wariness that broke Maya's heart. This was how it started. Maya knew. This was how children learned that the world saw them as threats before they even understood what that meant. "Fine," Maya said, her voice steady and determined. "You want DNA testing. Let's do DNA testing. But I want it on record that I'm being subjected to this humiliation based solely on the word of a woman who admits to stalking and photographing my child without permission. I want it documented that my daughter is being traumatized because someone decided we didn't look enough alike to suit their preferences." Officer Webb looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I don't think that's necessary. We have sufficient evidence that you are who you say you are. The child is clearly comfortable with you. She knows intimate details about your life together, and multiple witnesses can vouch for your relationship." "No," Maya said firmly. "I want the DNA test. I want it to be absolutely, scientifically, undeniably clear that this woman has wasted everyone's time and put my daughter through trauma based on nothing more than her own racial bias. When those results come back, I want them made public. I want there to be consequences for what happened here today." Karen seemed to realize for the first time that her accusations might have serious repercussions for herself. "Now wait a minute," she began, her voice less certain than before. "I was just trying to help. If I was wrong, then I apologize. But anyone would have been suspicious in my position." "No," Maya replied sharply. "Not anyone. Someone who sees a black woman and automatically assumes criminality. Someone who looks at my beautiful, happy daughter and imagines danger where none exists. Someone who decides that her gut feelings are more important than basic human decency. The DNA testing was arranged for the following day, conducted by the county medical examiner's office. Maya took Zara home that evening without being charged, but the damage had been done. Zara barely spoke during dinner, picking at her favorite mac and cheese while Maya struggled to find words that could explain the inexplicable. "Mama, why did that lady think you weren't my mama?" Zara finally asked as Maya tucked her into bed that night. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that no 8-year-old should have to grapple with. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her daughter's curls away from her forehead. How do you explain centuries of systemic racism to a child who still believes the world is fundamentally fair? How do you prepare your daughter for a reality where her existence will be questioned, her relationships scrutinized, her very presence seen as somehow threatening or wrong? Sometimes, baby, people make judgments based on what they think they know instead of what's actually true, Maya said carefully. That lady looked at us and made assumptions based on how we look, not on how much we love each other or how happy we are together. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. But sometimes, unfair things happen. But we do look alike, Zara protested, and Maya's heart broke a little more. Mrs. Patterson at school always says I have your smile, and Grandma says I walk just like you do, with my chin up. We absolutely do look alike, Maya agreed, kissing her daughter's forehead. And even if we didn't, it wouldn't matter. Families come in all different combinations. Love is what makes a family, not whether everyone has the exact same nose or the exact same skin tone. The DNA results arrived 48 hours later, delivered with the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that somehow made their contents feel even more surreal. The lab confirmed what everyone with functioning eyes and basic human decency had known from the beginning. Maya Johnson was indeed the biological mother of Zara Marie Johnson, with a probability of maternity exceeding 99.9999%. But by then, the story had taken on a life of its own. A teenager at the park had recorded the entire incident on her phone, and the video had begun circulating on social media within hours of their return home. The footage showed Maya in handcuffs, Zara crying, Karen making her accusations with supreme confidence, and the crowd of community members rallying to defend a family under attack. Maya first learned about the video when her phone began ringing at 6 in the morning. Reporters requesting comments about what they were calling another case of weaponized racism in everyday America. By noon, the hashtag #JoshJustice for Maya and Zara was trending nationally, and the video had been viewed over 2 million times. The response was swift and overwhelming. Maya's hospital issued a statement supporting their employee and condemning the harassment she had endured. Zara's school district released a letter to all families about the importance of respecting diverse family structures and the dangers of racial profiling. The mayor held a press conference calling for police reform and bias training. But it was the personal messages that affected Maya most deeply. Hundreds of other parents, mostly mothers of color, reached out to share their own stories of being questioned, challenged, or reported while simply existing with their children. The common thread running through all their experiences was the exhaustion of having to constantly prove their right to parent their own children. The hypervigilance required to navigate public spaces. The way their children learned too early that the world might not see them as belonging together. Karen Whitmore found herself at the center of a social media storm that she was completely unprepared to handle. Her full name had been identified within hours of the video going viral, and her employer, a high-end real estate firm, received hundreds of calls demanding her termination. Her social media accounts, which had previously been filled with inspirational quotes and pictures of her yoga poses were flooded with criticism and calls for accountability. 3 days after the DNA results were released, Karen appeared on a local news program to offer what she called an apology, but which sounded more like an attempt at damage control. Sitting in a television studio with perfect lighting and professional makeup, she looked nothing like the woman who had stood behind the trees at Riverside Park, convinced of her own righteousness. "I want to apologize to Maya and Zara," Karen said, her voice carefully modulated for the cameras. "I genuinely believed I was helping a child in danger. If I was wrong about what I observed, then I regret any distress I caused. But I still believe that concerned citizens have a responsibility to speak up when they see something that doesn't seem right." Maya watched the interview from her living room. Zara curled up beside her on the couch. Even Karen's apology was conditional, hedged with qualifications and excuses. She still couldn't admit that her actions had been motivated by racial bias, still couldn't acknowledge the fundamental humanity of the family she had attacked. "If she was wrong," Maya said to the television screen, "if there's no if about it, the DNA results are public record. The witnesses were clear. The child told them exactly who I was. There's no ambiguity here, except in her own unwillingness to face what she's done." The legal consequences for Karen began to mount quickly. The district attorney's office announced that they were investigating her for filing a false police report, a misdemeanor that could result in fines and community service. Maya's attorney filed a civil rights lawsuit alleging harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The City Parks Department, responding to public pressure, issued Karen a formal ban from all municipal park properties for a period of 1 year. But the most significant change came in the form of policy reforms. The police department announced new training requirements for all officers on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. They also implemented a new protocol requiring supervisory approval before detaining parents based solely on anonymous reports about child welfare, designed to prevent future incidents like the one that had traumatized Maya and Zara. The viral nature of the incident also sparked broader conversations about the phenomenon of weaponized calling, the practice of using 911 as a tool to harass people of color going about their daily lives. Community organizations began hosting workshops on bystander intervention, teaching people how to recognize and interrupt racially motivated harassment when they witnessed it. Maya found herself reluctantly thrust into the role of spokesperson for a cause she had never asked to represent. Interview requests poured in from national news programs. Advocacy organizations invited her to speak at conferences, and well-meaning strangers offered unsolicited advice about how to use her platform for maximum impact. But Maya's primary concern remained her daughter. Zara had begun having nightmares about police officers, had become anxious in public spaces, and had started asking difficult questions about why some people seemed to dislike them for reasons she couldn't understand. Maya arranged for counseling sessions with a therapist who specialized in helping children process trauma, and slowly, gradually, Zara began to heal. 6 months after the incident at Riverside Park, Maya received a phone call that she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Karen's attorney was requesting a meeting to discuss a potential settlement in the civil rights lawsuit. Maya's lawyer recommended accepting the meeting, if only to gauge Karen's willingness to take full responsibility for her actions. They met in a downtown conference room, sterile and impersonal, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city where both women had raised their children, lived their lives, and somehow arrived at this moment of reckoning. Karen looked older than she had in the television interview, her confidence replaced by something that might have been genuine remorse. "I've been in therapy," Karen said without preamble, once the lawyers had finished their preliminary discussions. "I've been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself, about my assumptions, about the way I see the world. I realize now that what I did to you and your daughter was inexcusable." Maya studied Karen's face, looking for signs of the manipulation and self-justification that had characterized her previous public statements. Instead, she saw something that looked like genuine shame, the kind of deep recognition that comes from having your worst impulses exposed under the harsh light of public scrutiny. "My daughter still has nightmares," Maya said quietly. "She's 8 years old, and she's afraid of police officers. She asks me why that lady thought we didn't belong together, and I have to explain racism to a third grader who should be worried about multiplication tables and playground politics, not whether strangers will question her right to exist with her own mother." Karen's eyes filled with tears that seemed genuine, though Maya had learned to be skeptical of white women's tears, having seen how often they were deployed as weapons rather than expressions of authentic emotion. "I know I can't undo what I did," Karen said. "I know my apology doesn't fix the trauma I caused, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, not just in my conclusions, but in my entire approach to the situation." "What do you understand?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about what Karen's therapy sessions had revealed to her about herself and her actions. Karen took a shaky breath before responding. "I understand that I saw what I expected to see based on my own prejudices. I understand that I prioritized my comfort over your humanity. I understand that I traumatized a child because I couldn't imagine that a black woman and a lighter-skinned child could be related. I understand that I used the police as a weapon against you, whether I intended to or not." The settlement negotiations took several more hours, but Maya found herself less interested in the financial terms than in Karen's acknowledgement of responsibility. Money couldn't undo Zara's nightmares or restore their sense of safety in public spaces, but accountability could begin the process of healing and perhaps prevent future families from experiencing similar trauma. As part of the settlement agreement, Karen agreed to make a public statement taking full responsibility for her actions without qualifications or excuses. She also committed to participating in community education programs about racial bias and the dangers of weaponized 911 calls, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about how prejudice can masquerade as concern. The morning after the settlement was finalized, Maya woke up to find Zara already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with her backpack ready for school. It was Wednesday, their traditional picnic day, but they hadn't returned to Riverside Park since the incident. Instead, they'd been having their weekly mother-daughter time at home, ordering pizza and watching movies on the couch. "Mama," Zara said, her voice stronger than it had been in months, "I want to go back to the park today. I want to feed the ducks and have our picnic like we used to." Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had been waiting for this moment, hoping that her daughter would eventually feel ready to reclaim the space that had been stolen from them by someone else's hatred and fear. But she also knew that returning to Riverside Park would require courage from both of them. "Are you sure, baby?" Maya asked gently. "We don't have to go there. We can have our picnic anywhere you want." "I'm sure," Zara said with the kind of determination that Maya recognized from her own reflection. "That's our park too. We belong there just as much as anyone else, and maybe other kids will see us there and know that they belong too." They packed their traditional Wednesday picnic peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, apple slices, juice boxes, and a bag of breadcrumbs for the ducks. As they drove toward Riverside Park, Maya felt her palms grow sweaty on the steering wheel. But Zara chattered excitedly about which ducks might remember them and whether the playground equipment had been updated since their last visit. When they arrived at the park, Maya was surprised to see how normal everything looked. The same oak trees cast shadows across the same green grass. Children played on the same playground equipment, and families spread blankets in the same sunny spots they always had. For a moment, it was easy to forget that this place had been the site of their public humiliation and trauma. But as they walked toward their usual spot by the pond, Maya noticed something different. Several families looked up as they passed, and instead of the idle curiosity that strangers usually showed each other, their faces lit up with recognition and warmth. A woman Maya didn't recognize approached them with a smile. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Aren't you Maya and Zara? I just wanted to say that I saw what happened to you here, and I'm so sorry. But I also wanted to thank you for speaking out about it. You've helped a lot of people understand things they never thought about before." Similar interactions followed throughout their picnic. Parents introduced themselves and their children. Older adults stopped to chat about the importance of community solidarity, and teenagers asked for selfies with Maya, treating her like a celebrity. What had begun as a simple mother-daughter outing became an impromptu community gathering, with people sharing stories, offering support, and expressing gratitude for Maya's courage in pursuing justice. As the afternoon wore on, Maya watched Zara playing with a group of children she'd just met, her laughter carrying across the water as she tossed breadcrumbs to an enthusiastic family of ducks. The wariness that had shadowed her daughter's eyes for months was finally beginning to fade, replaced by something that looked like hope. "She's resilient," said Mrs. Rodriguez, who had approached Maya while Zara was playing. "Children are so much stronger than we give them credit for. But what you did, standing up for yourselves and demanding accountability, that's going to stay with her forever. You taught her that she has the right to take up space in this world." As they packed up their picnic supplies that evening, Zara was already making plans for next Wednesday's adventure. She wanted to bring her art supplies and draw pictures of the ducks, she said, and maybe they could invite some of her new friends to join them. The park was theirs again, reclaimed not through force or anger, but through the simple act of showing up and refusing to be erased. That night, as Maya tucked Zara into bed, her daughter asked a question that would stay with Maya for years to come. "Mama, do you think that lady learned anything from what happened?" Maya considered the question carefully. Karen's tearful apology could have been performative. Her community service could be grudgingly completed, and her apparent remorse could fade once the public attention moved on to other stories. But Maya had also seen something in Karen's eyes during their settlement meeting that suggested genuine recognition of the harm she had caused. "I hope so, baby," Maya said finally. "I hope she learned that families come in all different colors and configurations. I hope she learned that assumptions can be dangerous. And I hope she learned that every child deserves to feel safe and loved and protected, whether they're with their biological parents, or their adoptive parents, or their grandparents, or anyone else who loves them. And I hope she learned that we belong here too," Zara added sleepily, echoing the words that had become something of a family motto in the months since their ordeal. "Especially that," Maya agreed, kissing her daughter's forehead. "We belong here too." The legal proceedings concluded 6 months later, with Karen pleading guilty to filing a false police report and completing 200 hours of community service with organizations focused on racial justice education. The civil settlement provided financial compensation for Maya and Zara's trauma and therapy costs. But more importantly, it included provisions for ongoing community education programs designed to prevent similar incidents. Maya used part of the settlement money to establish a scholarship fund for children of color pursuing careers in healthcare. Inspired by her own journey from a working-class neighborhood to medical school to her position as a pediatric nurse, she also began speaking at conferences and community events about the impact of racial profiling on families, sharing her story not for fame or attention, but because silence felt like complicity. The police department's new protocols were put to the test several times in the following months, and in each case, officers were required to gather substantial evidence before detaining parents based on anonymous reports. The bias training became mandatory for all city employees, not just law enforcement, and the curriculum was developed in partnership with local civil rights organizations. Karen kept her word about participating in community education programs, though Maya wondered whether her motivation was genuine remorse or legal obligation. Either way, her presence at these events served as a powerful reminder of how quickly prejudice could escalate into trauma when combined with the authority of law enforcement. 2 years after the incident at Riverside Park, Maya received an unexpected letter in the mail. The return address showed Karen's name, but there was no lawyer's letterhead, no official legal business to conduct. Maya almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of her. The letter was handwritten, not typed, and it began with an apology that sounded different from all the others Karen had offered. This one was specific, personal, and unqualified by excuses or self-justification. Karen wrote about her continued therapy, about the ways she had begun to examine and dismantle her own racial biases, about the work she was doing to educate other white women about the dangers of weaponized 911 calls. But it was the letter's ending that surprised Maya most. "I know you have no reason to forgive me, and I'm not asking you to. But I wanted you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think about what I put you and Zara through. And I'm committed to spending the rest of my life trying to prevent other families from experiencing the same trauma. You and your daughter deserved so much better from me and from our community." Maya read the letter twice before sharing it with Zara, who was now 10 years old and had developed her own opinions about justice, forgiveness, and the complexity of human nature. They discussed whether people could truly change, whether accountability could lead to redemption, and what it meant to break cycles of harm and prejudice. "Do you think we should write her back?" Zara asked, after considering the letter carefully. Maya thought about it for several days before responding. Forgiveness was not something that could be rushed or performed for other people's comfort, but acknowledgement of genuine change, recognition of authentic growth, and support for someone's efforts to do better. Those were different things entirely. In the end, Maya decided to send a brief response acknowledging Karen's letter and her continued work in the community. She didn't offer forgiveness, which felt premature and unnecessary, but she did express hope that Karen's efforts would help prevent other families from experiencing similar trauma. The exchange marked a kind of closure that Maya hadn't expected to find. Not the closure of forgetting or moving on, but the closure of seeing justice served, accountability accepted, and genuine change beginning to take root. It wasn't a Hollywood ending with tearful reconciliation and immediate healing, but it was something more realistic and perhaps more meaningful, the slow, steady work of repairing harm and building a more just community. Maya and Zara continued their Wednesday picnics at Riverside Park, and over time, their presence there became part of the park's ecosystem. Other families of color began joining them, creating an informal support network of parents who understood the unique challenges of raising children in a world that didn't always see them as belonging. The incident that had begun with handcuffs and trauma had ultimately led to policy changes, community education, legal accountability, and the creation of spaces where all families could feel safe and welcome. It wasn't the outcome Maya would have chosen. She would have preferred that none of it had ever happened. But it was an outcome that gave meaning to their suffering and hope for the future. As Zara grew older, She began to understand her family's story as part of a larger narrative about justice, resilience, and the ongoing work of creating a more equitable society. She wrote school essays about bias and discrimination, participated in youth advocacy programs, and gradually developed her own voice as someone who had experienced injustice but refused to be defined by it. Years later, when Zara was applying to college and writing personal statements about experiences that had shaped her worldview, she would describe that Wednesday afternoon at Riverside Park not as the day she learned that the world was unfair, but as the day she learned that individuals could fight back against unfairness and win. She would write about watching her mother refuse to be diminished by false accusations, about seeing their community rally to support them, and about discovering that justice was not something that happened automatically, but something that had to be demanded, pursued, and protected. The story would become part of their family mythology, passed down through generations as evidence that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they refused to accept injustice as inevitable. It would serve as a reminder that belonging was not something granted by others, but something claimed and defended. That love between family members was not subject to external validation, and that the arc of justice, while long, could indeed bend toward progress when enough people were willing to pull it in the right direction. Maya never became a professional activist or public speaker. Despite numerous invitations to do so, she remained a pediatric nurse, caring for sick children and supporting their families through difficult times. But she also became a quiet advocate for policy changes, a mentor for other parents who had experienced discrimination, and a voice for justice within her community. The settlement money helped pay for Zara's college education, and Zara chose to study social work with a focus on family advocacy. She would graduate with honors, armed with both the academic knowledge and the lived experience necessary to help other families navigate systems that were not always designed with their best interests in mind. On Zara's 18th birthday, Maya gave her daughter a special gift, a photo album documenting their journey from that traumatic Wednesday afternoon through the legal proceedings, the policy changes, the community support, and the gradual healing that had followed. The album's final page contained a newspaper clipping about the scholarship fund Maya had established, with a note that read, "For all the families who will never have to experience what we went through because we refused to let injustice have the last word." That evening, as they celebrated Zara's birthday with extended family and friends, Maya reflected on how different their lives might have been if they had chosen silence over advocacy, if they had accepted Karen's false accusations without fighting back, if they had allowed trauma to define them, rather than using it as fuel for positive change. The journey from that afternoon at Riverside Park to this moment of celebration had not been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks and disappointments, moments of doubt and frustration, times when the work of seeking justice felt overwhelming and endless. But there had also been unexpected allies, meaningful victories, genuine progress, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing that their suffering had not been in vain. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Zara pulled her mother aside for a private conversation. "Thank you," she said simply, "for teaching me that I don't have to accept injustice, for showing me that I have the right to take up space in this world, for fighting for us when it would have been easier to just let it go." Maya hugged her daughter tightly, remembering the frightened 8-year-old who had watched her mother being handcuffed for the crime of existing while black in a public park. That little girl had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman who understood both the reality of injustice and the possibility of change. "You never have to thank me for loving you enough to fight for you," Maya said. "That's just what mothers do. We protect our children. We advocate for our families. and we work to make the world a better place for the next generation. The next day was a Wednesday, and despite Zara being away at college now, Maya found herself driving to Riverside Park out of habit. She spread her blanket by the pond, unpacked a simple lunch, and sat in the familiar spot where her life had changed so dramatically years before. The park was busy with families enjoying the mild weather, children playing on the playground, teenagers throwing frisbees on the grass. A young black mother sat nearby with her toddler, both of them laughing as they fed the ducks. Maya caught the woman's eye and smiled, remembering her own feelings of hypervigilance in public spaces, the constant awareness that their presence might be questioned or challenged. But this mother seemed relaxed, confident, unafraid. Her child played freely, secure in the knowledge that they belonged exactly where they were. And Maya realized that this sense of safety and belonging that she had fought so hard to reclaim was perhaps the most important legacy of their ordeal. As she packed up her lunch and prepared to leave, Maya noticed a small plaque that had been installed near the pond sometime in the past year. It read, "Riverside Community Park welcomes all families. We celebrate the diversity that makes our community strong and reject discrimination in all its forms. Everyone belongs here." Maya smiled, knowing that she and Zara had played a role in making that plaque necessary and possible. Their story had become part of the park's history, part of the community's commitment to justice and inclusion. And while she would never be grateful for the trauma they had endured, she was proud of the way they had transformed that trauma into something meaningful and lasting. Driving home through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, Maya reflected on the long journey from that awful Wednesday afternoon to this moment of quiet satisfaction. Justice had not come easily or quickly, but it had come. Their voices had been heard, their dignity had been restored, and their community had been changed for the better. Most importantly, Zara had learned that she was not powerless in the face of injustice, that she had allies and advocates who would stand with her, and that love and determination could ultimately triumph over prejudice and hate. Those were lessons that would serve her well throughout her life, whether she was facing discrimination herself or standing up for others who needed support. The story that had begun with handcuffs and tears had evolved into something larger and more hopeful, a testament to the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. A reminder that justice is not a destination, but an ongoing journey, and a promise that the next generation will inherit a world slightly more fair and compassionate than the one they had found. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.